Today, thousands of John Deere workers go on strike. What do they want and when do they want it? And the latest U.S. social media platform to leave the Chinese market, LinkedIn, says it will shut down its Chinese site later this year. And several big banks report results today. Where are they seeing the profits? That and much more coming up on NTD Business. Good evening. Great to have you with us. I'm Paul Graney. After a painful consumer price index yesterday, again, the producer price index is showing the highest annual reading since records began in 2010. PPI includes prices paid by producers and consumers sometimes for finished products. Like yesterday's reading, producers are paying significantly more for food and energy. But on one positive note, prices are rising at a slower pace than the last 2 months, maybe, just maybe, indicating a peak in pricing pressures. But the problem is global. Britain's food price inflation could hit double digits, according to the country's biggest chicken producer. The UK is facing a shortage of truckers, butchers, and warehouse workers. That's worsened supply chain strains. The Two Sisters Group produces around 1/3 of all poultry products consumed in the UK. Its owner is known as the Chicken King. He says the labor shortage will lead to wage inflation and force them to invest in automation. He says he doesn't think the British government can fix the problems or control inflation. And Argentina is imposing price controls in response to rising prices. It struck a deal with retailers to freeze the prices of over 1,200 items. It says the price caps will last for 3 months, and items include food and household products, the basics really. And if you thought inflation was bad in America, consumer prices are rising almost 50% every year in Argentina. Authorities have increased the number of Argentine pesos in circulation by 500% in the past decade. According to the Federal Reserve. Incredible. Now, an Argentine official says the government's concerned food is taking up a larger part of people's income. So joining us to discuss the problems in Argentina is Fergus Hodgson. He's the director of Econ Americas. It's an economic research company specializing on Latin America. Fergus, great pleasure to see you as always. Thanks so much for coming on. I think the thing that caught my eye about this is the price caps are only in place for 90 days. Do you think that the government there are expecting the prices to come down between now and then, or what's the situation?
Oh, thanks for having me on, Paul. And I doubt they'll last only 90 days. They'll almost certainly continue. The fact is, these are part of what are called precios cuidados, or careful prices in Argentina, and they've been around for years, and basically the number is just growing with time. So one report from Reuters said it was 1,200, another said 900, but basically they've just continued to expand. When I lived there in 2016, you'd go to the supermarket and certain items would be marked, these are precios cuidados, or careful prices, and they'd be empty. They'd be out of them. So very quick lesson in economics right there.
That's what I was going to ask. So basically these products, they just don't appear on the shelves. If I'm a producer, right, and I'm producing it below cost, I just stop producing. Is this what happens?
Well, two things happen. One, you create a shortage, right? So where there's excess demand, and then you create a black market. So people will hoard them and then sell them privately at a higher price. And one of the reasons why we can say with almost certainty these price controls will continue on beyond 90 days is what happened last year in 2020 to controls on beef exports. Basically in 2020, the Argentine federal government or central government banned exports of beef, which is insane because it's a huge money earner for the country. And then that has continued in milder forms. But basically the cap has been at 50% of previous levels through this year. And some cuts of beef are still banned entirely from export.
We complain about the rate of inflation here in the States, right? And rightly so. Prices are rising really fast. I believe in Argentina, it's 50% per year. This is an incredibly inflationary environment. I assume wages aren't in any way keeping up with the rising prices, are they?
Yeah, that's a good question, Paul. So even the official government statistics, which are notoriously dishonest, have given inflation at 43%. Okay, so it makes the 5.5% of the United States seem trivial. Of course it is not, but in Argentina it's out of control. And there have been rates recorded privately, so private gauges of inflation going around 200%, right? So
per year, annually.
Annual rates of 200%. So it's not quite hyperinflation, which would be 50% per month, but it's so high that it is destabilizing. One of the reasons why this policy has come in of greatly expanded price controls on many goods was exactly what you're saying, the way that wages have not kept up, and therefore people are paying a higher and higher proportion of their salaries in just household items.
I've seen some incredible graphs as well of the increase in the monetary supply, the money supply. It's been incredible in Argentina, right?
That's the problem, actually. I'm glad you raised it, because all this talk about cracking down on beef producers or supermarket suppliers, it is a complete distraction. And that's why they're doing this right before the election, to try to place blame on these producers or suppliers as though they somehow are determining the prices. They're in competitive markets, they respond to demand and supply, and when you generate huge deficit spending and monetary expansion, there's going to be an increase in demand and upward pressure on prices. So it's a huge deflection or scapegoating away from the fact that there is this unsustainable fiscal spending, which has been around Argentina for decades.
Sometimes in these types of environments, I see you could call it a vicious cycle. We have people who are really hurt by the devaluation and the debasement of the currency through social spending or government spending, but in turn they'll call to the government for more help. Hey, we're losing money, we're losing wealth, come and help us, and it creates this vicious cycle where the government print more money, debase the currency further to appease them. Do you see this type of culture among people in Argentina?
Exactly. One of my old macroeconomics professors used to say that although we might think that this government spending is helping workers, in actual fact, it's fleecing them, because they're the ones on fixed incomes. They're the ones who are hurt the most when you devalue or dilute the value of their salaries. In terms of populism, what we see in this Peronista or Justicialista party in Argentina is the worst elements of populism. So populism doesn't necessarily have to be bad. Much populism is basically identifying privilege or elite status or preferential treatment to those in power. And people, the masses, saying this is wrong. With the popular masses, the wide population say this is wrong, we don't like it, so it's a populist outrage. What we're seeing is basically a pleading to populist concerns or to the concerns of the people and giving them, playing a bread and circus, giving them special treats, which really just distractions from the real problem.
We'll wait and see. Fergus Hodgson, Econ Americas, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
And the number of Americans filing for jobless benefits fell to its lowest level since the pandemic began. Possible sign the job market is slowly improving. Jobless claims is a gauge for layoffs. It dropped to 293,000 last week. That's the second straight drop and the first time claims have dipped below 300,000 since the pandemic began. Meanwhile, hiring has slowed in the past 2 months. Businesses still struggling to find workers. And another day, another blow to the supply chains. Thousands of workers are going on strike at John Deere, a farm equipment brand. The union failed to reach a deal for more pay and benefits. NTD's Phil Zoe has what you need to know.
Around 10,000 workers at the world's largest farm equipment maker, John Deere, are going on strike, impacting 14 facilities across the U.S. That's after 90% of union workers over at United Auto Workers, or UAW, rejected a contract on wages and benefits that was agreed to earlier this month.
Essentially what's happening is because we have a 5% or higher inflation rate, workers say, look, we need to get a raise that exceeds the inflation rate.
John Deere told NTD News it's committed to reaching an agreement with the UAW and making them the highest paid employees in the farming and construction industries. John Deere also said under the tentative agreement, a typical employee's wages would increase to $72,000 a year. That would be a $12,000 increase. The union says it's committed to bargaining until our members' goals are achieved. NTD News reached out to the UAW but did not hear back. But Professor Bustler says if this keeps going on, it will lead the economy to a downward spiral.
If they get it, then businesses' labor costs go up by 7%. They have to raise their prices by 7% to compensate for that. That leads to even higher inflation. Then labor comes back next year and said, look, inflation's 7%, I need an 8-9% raise.
Professor Bustler says one example is when inflation hit 13% in 1981. The Federal Reserve had to take action, raising interest rates, which often lead to recessions. John Deere says it's activating the Customer Service Continuation Plan, which will bring workers into the factories daily so they can keep operations running and ensure customers, including suppliers and communities, are not impacted. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
And social networking platform LinkedIn is going offline in China. The company says it's because it's under growing pressure from Beijing's censorship rules, so it'll release a new app there instead. That app won't allow individual users to share content. NTD's Allison Lee brings us more.
Microsoft's LinkedIn announced Thursday that they are going to shut down the Chinese version of their platform later this year. They say they're facing a significantly more challenging operating environment and greater compliance requirements in China. LinkedIn launched a localized version for China in 2014, and it is the last major U.S. social media platform openly accessible in China. The company acknowledges that when they launched the Chinese app, they agreed to adhere to the Chinese regime's internet requirements. Beijing requires all internet companies operating in China to hand over user data and censor on demand. LinkedIn explains their decision back then. While we strongly support freedom of expression, we took this approach in order to create value for our members in China and around the world. After the Chinese version is shut down, the company will launch a new standalone app called InJobs in China later this year. InJobs will not include a social feed or the ability to share posts or articles. LinkedIn explains their goal moving forward is to work with Chinese businesses to help them create economic opportunity and deliver more prosperity in the world. Back in March, Chinese internet regulators told LinkedIn to censor what the regime called political content. And just last month, the company blocked the profiles of several U.S. journalists in China for posting prohibited content. China is currently LinkedIn's third largest market globally after the U.S. and India. Allison Lee, NTD News.
And U.S. stocks surged today as several big companies reported strong earnings. The Dow rose 535 points, about 1.6%. S&P 500 gained 74 points, about 1.7%. And the Nasdaq gained 252 points today, also about 1.7%. And some of America's big banks reported quarterly earnings today. They've seen profit increases really across the board. NTD's Faye Quarter gives us the earnings rundown.
5 major U.S. banks reported earnings Thursday, and all of them are reporting substantial profit increases from last year. Morgan Stanley reported a 35% year-over-year net income increase, U.S. Bancorp a 28% increase, Citigroup a 48% increase, Bank of America a 64% increase, and Wells Fargo an increase of 59%. 3 of the banks freed up some of their reserves, which they stored during the incipient stages of the pandemic. Bank of America freed up $1.1 billion, Citigroup freed up $1.16 billion, and Wells Fargo freed up $1.65 billion. Most of the money goes straight to the bottom line. Meanwhile, Wells Fargo paid a $250 million fine for not addressing problems with its mortgage business. The Office of Comptroller of the Currency says the bank has significant deficiencies in regards to loss mitigation for its customers. And Morgan Stanley saw its earnings from advisory fees triple to a record $1.27 billion. This comes amid a record quarter for mergers and acquisitions. Faye Quarter, NTD News.
And Walgreens is getting deeper into healthcare. It's investing $5.5 billion into healthcare providers in an effort to turn its drugstores into health clinics. It's taking a majority stake in healthcare provider Village MD and also plans to have at least 600 primary care clinics in the United States by 2025. Now it has about 50 across the country. In these clinics, there will be doctors to write prescriptions, provide checkups, and other types of care. Walgreens has more than 9,000 drugstores across the country. And Domino's Pizza posted its first sales drop today in over a decade. Could signal a slowdown in delivery demand as consumers move away from their pandemic habits. NTD's Evelyn Lee reports.
It seems that Domino's Pizza has hit a turning point. In the U.S., same-store sales shrank by almost 2% in the third quarter. During the pandemic, demand for Domino's skyrocketed. According to Domino's controller and treasurer, Jessica Parrish, the economic stimulus played a significant role. This is now tapering off.
Our U.S. order counts during Q3 were pressured by a very challenging staffing environment, which had certain operational impacts such as shortened store hours or customer service challenges in many of our stores.
Now with easing restrictions, investors are also worrying about pizza fatigue. Domino's performance could set the tone for earnings from other fast food chains which benefited heavily during lockdowns, especially now with customers turning to traveling and dining outdoors. But outside the U.S., the company is doing better. Global customers still rely on food deliveries with tougher pandemic restrictions. And international same-store sales climbed by almost 9% in the quarter. The pizza chain's total revenue rose to $998 million in the third quarter, missing analysts' estimate of $1.4 billion. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
And Taiwan chip giant TSMC is planning to build a factory in Japan. The company hopes to meet long-term chip supply demand, but there says the near-term supply is likely to remain tight into next year. Demand for chips has skyrocketed during the CCP virus pandemic. The Japanese plant is likely to be in production by late 2024. TSMC is the world's largest contract chip maker and a key supplier for Apple. TSMC and Taiwan as a whole have become central in efforts to resolve the global chip shortage, which has hurt production of cars, smartphones, and all types of electronics. And in China, if you drive an hour or two outside Shanghai or Beijing, you may see something odd. The buildings are tall and modern, but many are empty. These are China's ghost cities, so how did this happen and how will it affect U.S. investors? NTD's Con Fredrickson explains.
China's empty buildings are not abandoned, they're just unoccupied. The sector is rampant with speculation.
It favored development. It encouraged the provinces to invest with developers like Evergrande to build these buildings.
The Economist reported every year China starts building 15 million new homes. That's 5 times as many as the U.S. and Europe combined. China is still a planned economy, which has contributed to the mismatch between supply and demand.
Because it wasn't market directed, it really was not in response to what the Chinese people needed. It was in response to what the planning authority wanted.
Chinese real estate giant Evergrande has more than 1,300 developments spread across 280 cities in China, which collectively house more than 12 million people, or the population of New York City and Los Angeles combined. But Evergrande also has $300 billion in debt, making it the most indebted property developer in the world. It has 1.6 million undelivered apartments, and it keeps missing its bond payments. Ezrati says there could be a bigger problem.
The greater threat will be if this debt situation begins to erode confidence within Chinese finance. And people start refusing to trade with each other, people start refusing to do deals. Then the Chinese economy will be in trouble.
Shares and bonds of Chinese real estate companies slid on Thursday as investors remain uncertain about how a debt crisis will play out at Evergrande and the wider property sector. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
Still to come this evening. McDonald's is testing out a new burger in the United States, but it's not your typical burger. Find out what's in it. And 3 blacksmith families in central Bosnia preserve a centuries-long tradition. They forge iron the medieval way, using only the power of water and fire. That and more coming up on NTD Business.
What does it mean to devote your life to the truth? Does it mean investigating communist subversion here in America? Does it mean exposing the deadly fentanyl crisis in the Midwest? Or spending late nights uncovering deep government corruption? Does it mean persevering over 20 years, even after 4 masked men set one of our printing presses on fire last year? Because at a time when America's traditional values are under attack, it's the responsibility of righteous journalists to uphold truth and tradition.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
Welcome back. McDonald's will start testing its plant-based Mcplant burger next month. Be available in 8 U.S. locations for a limited time. The burger was developed with vegan meat maker Beyond Meat. McDonald's says it's made with a plant-based patty, a sesame seed bun, vegan sandwich sauce, lettuce, tomato, and more. There's also a vegan alternative to cheese. The Mcplant burger is already available in some countries, including Sweden, Denmark, and the UK. McDonald's says it will run the test as long as supplies last. And one restaurant owner in Thailand is making waves, literally. He thought severe flooding could be a problem. Turns out his customers love it. NTD's Andrew Thomas reports.
The owner of a riverside restaurant in Thailand was convinced that flooding could be the end. But as the level of the Chao Phraya River rose, an unexpected opportunity presented itself.
What I thought would be a crisis turned into an opportunity. Not only do they love the atmosphere and the barbecue pork, but also the view of the sunset above the Chao Phraya River. However, the flood became an additional unique factor. I feel so lucky that the customers love it. The flood wasn't a challenge for them.
So the eatery is taking advantage, staying open for customers to frolic in the shin-deep water. What could have been a crisis has become a unique dining experience. About 30 northern and central provinces have been hit by flooding in recent weeks, raising levels of the famous river that flows through Bangkok. Customers cheer and laugh as their wooden stools are knocked over by the water.
Customers come here for a lot of reasons. They enjoy the barbecue pork, the atmosphere, and the waves. Customers absolutely love the waves. They come with appropriate attire like shorts. Some even brought their kids and families to experience this.
The restaurant holds 2 sittings each day for diners to enjoy the experience when the water levels are highest. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And a European gambling company is looking for someone to watch all TV episodes of The Simpsons, plus the Simpsons movie. It'll even pay you $7,000 plus donuts. Playton Casino wants someone to help analyze the series to find prophecies. The gambling website says The Simpsons predicted events like Donald Trump's presidency and the CCP virus pandemic. Now it wants to see what other future events are hiding in 280 hours of Simpsons footage. The chosen TV watcher will have 8 weeks to complete the task and take notes on standout storylines. A team will then use them to compile a list of predictions. Donuts are, of course, the favorite snack of Homer Simpson and offered as a work-time perk. A love of Simpsons is preferred, but not required. And one village in Bosnia is believed to be one of the last to preserve medieval iron-making skills. It relies solely on the power of water and fire. It's been passed down through local families for centuries. NTD's Con Fredrickson has the story.
First heated in a charcoal fire, then pounded by a large hammer. In this Bosnian village on the Balkan Peninsula, iron is still forged the same way as in the Middle Ages, using only the power of water and fire. It's one of the last known places in Europe to retain this medieval tradition.
My father was also taught this craft by his father. This forge is believed to have been established by the Jozelczyk family some 700 years ago. We worked here during the Ottoman rule. They also needed good craftsmen, and blacksmithing is a form of art. A real blacksmith must be an artist.
The first written mention of this blacksmith village dates back to 1485. A nearby river powers the 3-century-old forges that still operate here. In this blacksmith family, the craft of iron making has been passed on for generations.
It is my turn now. It remains to be seen what the future will bring. But as long as we can earn a living working here in this way, we don't plan to change anything.
For more than 50 years, cookware has replaced agricultural tools as the best-selling products from the forges. Among them is this lidded iron dish, used for slow-cooking meat and vegetables under hot embers. While the blacksmiths are happy to adapt their range of products for the modern age, they're not abandoning their ancestral skills.
There are many blacksmiths, some better than others, but the way in which we work, utilizing the power of water, not relying on electric power much, heating iron in charcoal fires that you cannot find anywhere else.
But challenges are also present. For one, the area once had its own charcoal burners. But as some of the ancient foundries began to close, they didn't pass on that trade to anyone else in the village. There are just 3 of them left today. Now, every year they hire a charcoal burner from 60 miles away to burn wood for them. The process involves digging out a large hole in the ground and building a large heap of logs over it. Then it's covered with grass, moss, and earth before a fire is ignited inside. The pile usually burns for 15 days, slowly settling until the hole he dug out is filled with charcoal. But despite the obstacles, the fire of this ancient craft is still alight in the village.
Tough work. That's the latest business updates for today, but you can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, it's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.